One name often slips into obscurity, a name that could have altered the course of history. Otto Strasser, a man overshadowed by his more famous brother and the monstrous figure he once supported, chose a path that set him against the very forces he helped to build. His story is one of defiance, betrayal, and a dangerous game of survival against an unforgiving regime. Otto Strasser wasn't merely another voice in the chaotic political landscape of early 20th century Germany. He was a fervent believer in National Socialism, but not the kind that Hitler envisioned. While the world remembers the iron grip with which Hitler led his party, few know of the ideological battles that raged within the Nazi ranks. Strasser, disillusioned by the increasing authoritarianism and the alliance with big business, found himself at odds with the very leader he once followed. This rift wasn't just a political disagreement. It was a deep ideological conflict that led Strasser to break away from the party and form his own resistance movement, the Black Front. In doing so, he declared himself an enemy of the Nazi state, an act that would force him into a life of exile, hunted by the very forces he once sought to empower. Today, we explore the life of Otto Strasser, a man who chose to stand against the tide, whose story is a chilling reminder of the cost of dissent in a world teetering on the edge of madness. Early life and World War I. Otto Strasser was born on September 10, 1897, in the small town of Bad Windsheim. He grew up in a Catholic family, with his father working as a judicial officer in the Upper Bavarian market town of Geisenfeld. The Strasser family valued discipline, faith, and a strong sense of justice, which would shape Otto's beliefs and actions later in life. From a young age, Otto was interested in philosophy, literature, and politics. He read many books, including those by Karl Marx and Friedrich Nietzsche, which sparked his curiosity about the social and political issues of his time. However, his studies were cut short when World War I began in 1914. At just 16 years old, Otto joined the Bavarian army on August 2, 1914. Like many young men of his time, he was eager to serve his country. But the war was far from what anyone had expected. It was brutal and relentless, testing the courage and resilience of everyone involved. Otto quickly rose through the military ranks, showing bravery and leadership on the battlefield. He was promoted to lieutenant, a rank that recognized his skills and dedication. However, the war left him with both physical and emotional wounds. He was injured twice and witnessed the horrors of trench warfare, constant shelling, gas attacks, and the ever-present threat of death. These experiences left a lasting impact on him, shaping his views on the world and the people who held power. Free Corps and the Social Democratic Party, 1919 to 1920. After the war ended in November 1918, Otto returned to a Germany that was in chaos. The country was devastated by the war, with a crumbling economy, widespread hunger, and political unrest. The monarchy had fallen, and a fragile democracy was trying to take hold. Revolutionary movements were gaining momentum, with workers and soldiers forming councils, inspired by the recent revolution in Russia. In this turbulent time, Otto joined the Free Corps, a paramilitary group made up of World War I veterans who were determined to stop the spread of communism in Germany. The Free Corps played a key role in crushing revolutionary movements that threatened the new Weimar Republic. In May 1919, Otto was part of the group that violently suppressed the Bavarian Soviet Republic, a short-lived socialist state. This experience gave him a clearer understanding of the political battles taking place in post-war Germany. Despite his involvement with the Free Corps, Otto was initially drawn to the Social Democratic Party, SPD, which at the time was focused on workers' rights and social justice. But his time with the SPD didn't last long. The party's shift towards a more moderate approach, especially its decision to put down a workers' uprising in the Ruhr in 1920, left Otto feeling disappointed and disconnected. He had hoped to be part of a movement that would bring about real social change. But it became clear to him that the SPD was more interested in maintaining order than pursuing revolutionary goals. Disillusioned, Otto left the SPD later that year, joining the Nazi Party, 1925 to 1930. By the mid-1920s, Otto Strasser had grown more radical in his political views. Disappointed with the moderate stance of the SPD, he began looking for other ways to achieve the social revolution he believed in. In 1925, he joined the National Socialist German Workers' Party, NSDAP, a party that promised bold changes for Germany. His brother, Gregor, had already been a member for several years and had become an influential figure within the party. Together, the Strasser brothers quickly became key figures in the NSDAP, especially in northern Germany, where they emphasized the socialist elements of the party's program. As a journalist for the party's newspaper, Otto played a crucial role in shaping the ideas within the NSDAP. He and his brother pushed for policies such as profit sharing, support for Nazi unions, and closer ties with the Soviet Union, even though there were ideological differences between the two. These views put them at odds with Adolf Hitler and the more conservative members of the party, who were more focused on nationalist and racist ideologies than on socialist reforms. The Strasser brothers were among the most prominent radicals within the Nazi Party, and their influence led to tension within the ranks. At the Bamberg Conference in 1926, the Strasserist program was decisively defeated, marking a turning point in the party's direction away from the socialist ideals that Otto and Gregor had supported. Despite this setback, Otto remained a leading figure in the party's left wing until 1930, when his strong opposition to Hitler's leadership led to his expulsion from the NSDAP after a fierce attack led by Joseph Goebbels at a General Assembly. Otto Strasser's early life was shaped by war, political upheaval, and ideological battles. His journey from a young soldier to a radical political dissenter reflects the troubled times he lived in, a period when Germany was struggling to find its identity after a devastating war, and when the seeds of one of history's darkest chapters were being planted. Nazi dissident in Germany, 1930 to 1933. In the early 1930s, Otto Strasser found himself at a crossroads. He had been a significant figure within the National Socialist German Workers' Party, NSDAP. But his growing discontent with Adolf Hitler's leadership led him to take a stand. The tension between Strasser and Hitler came to a head on July 1, 1930, when Strasser sent a telegram to Hitler demanding an explanation for the aggressive actions taken by Joseph Goebbels, one of Hitler's closest allies. However, Hitler provided no response, making it clear that there was no room for dissent within the party. Frustrated and disillusioned, Strasser made a bold decision. He officially broke away from the NSDAP and established his own political movement called the Black Front. This new party attracted former members of the NSDAP who, like Strasser, were unhappy with the direction Hitler was taking. The Black Front sought to challenge Hitler's growing influence by promoting a more radical socialist agenda that opposed the increasingly authoritarian and nationalist policies of the NSDAP. Despite Strasser's efforts, the Black Front struggled to gain traction. Hitler's power was rapidly increasing, and his charisma, combined with his ability to manipulate the masses, made it difficult for any opposition to take hold. The Black Front, though passionate in its cause, lacked the resources and widespread support needed to effectively counter Hitler's rise. By the time Hitler became Chancellor of Germany in 1933, Strasser's movement had failed to make a significant impact. The years that followed were marked by severe repression as Hitler consolidated his power. Strasser, recognizing the danger he was in, went into exile. He spent the years of the Nazi era moving from country to country, seeking refuge in places like Austria, Czechoslovakia, Switzerland, and eventually France. From abroad, he continued to voice his opposition to Hitler, but his influence was severely limited. The situation in Germany became even more perilous during the Night of the Long Knives in June 1934. This event was a brutal purge carried out by Hitler to eliminate potential threats within his own party. The Strasserists, along with other perceived enemies, were targeted during this bloody operation. Gregor Strasser, Otto's brother and once a powerful figure within the NSDAP, was among those killed. His death marked the end of any significant opposition within the Nazi Party and solidified Hitler's control over the organization. With Gregor Strasser and other key figures eliminated, Hitler emerged as the undisputed leader of the Nazi Party. This consolidation of power allowed him to gain the support of the industrialists and military elite, who had been wary of the more radical elements within the party, such as those represented by the Strasser brothers and Ernst Röhm, leader of the SA Sturmabteilung. By removing these threats, Hitler was able to assure the powerful figures in German society that the Nazi Party would not pursue policies that would jeopardize their interests. For Otto Strasser, the loss of his brother and the collapse of his political movement were devastating. While in exile, he continued to write and speak out against the Nazi regime, but his efforts were largely in vain. The world was heading toward another catastrophic war, and the forces of fascism were growing stronger. The Black Front and exile. In the early 1930s, Otto Strasser found himself increasingly at odds with the direction Adolf Hitler was taking the Nazi Party. After severing ties with the NSDAP, Strasser founded the Black Front, a political movement aimed at challenging Hitler's rise to power. The Black Front consisted of former Nazi members who were disillusioned with the party's leadership and sought to promote a more radical socialist agenda. However, Strasser's efforts to resist Hitler were met with significant challenges, and his movement struggled to gain momentum. As Hitler's grip on power tightened, Strasser realized the growing danger he faced. To evade persecution, he fled Germany, beginning a life in exile that would take him across Europe and eventually to North America. Strasser first sought refuge in Austria, then moved to Czechoslovakia, Switzerland, and France, always staying one step ahead of Nazi forces. In 1940, with the threat of war looming over Europe, he made his way to Bermuda via Portugal, leaving behind his wife and 2 children in Switzerland. In 1941, Strasser emigrated to Canada, where he became known as the Prisoner of Ottawa. The Nazi regime, particularly Joseph Goebbels, labeled Strasser as public enemy number 1, placing a $500,000 bounty on his head. Strasser initially settled in Montreal but later moved to Clarence, Nova Scotia, and then to Paradise, where he lived in relative obscurity for more than a decade. During his exile, Strasser remained active in opposing Hitler's regime. He headed the Free German Movement, an organization founded in 1941 that sought to unite Germans around the world in the fight against Nazism. Strasser also used his writing skills to contribute articles to British, American, and Canadian newspapers, shedding light on the inner workings of the Nazi government. His insights were particularly valued by the Montreal Gazette, where his work was ghostwritten by Donald C. MacDonald, a journalist who later became a prominent politician. Despite his efforts to distance himself from the Nazi regime, Strasser's past as a former high-ranking Nazi official made it difficult for him to return to Germany after the war. The Allied powers and later the West German government initially prevented him from re-entering the country. Strasser's political views further complicated matters. He believed that West Germany had become an American colony and East Germany a Russian one. His strong opinions and associations made him a controversial figure in post-war Europe. In 1950, Strasser received an invitation from East Germany to join the National Front. But he declined, still harboring hopes of returning to his homeland of Bavaria. His return to West Germany was finally granted on March 16, 1955, when he regained his citizenship and settled in Munich. Despite his return, Strasser's political career struggled to regain its former prominence. In 1956, he attempted to establish a new party, the German Social Union, Deutsche Sozialunion, which aimed to revive his vision of nationalist socialism. However, the party failed to attract significant support, and Strasser's influence continued to wane. Throughout his later years, Strasser remained committed to his beliefs, advocating for his interpretation of Nazi ideology until his death in Munich in 1974. His life was marked by a steadfast dedication to his principles, even as the world around him changed dramatically. Otto Strasser's story is a fascinating chapter in history, filled with complexities and contradictions. He was a man who stood against the very regime he once supported, highlighting the deep divisions and internal struggles within the Nazi Party. Strasser's opposition to Adolf Hitler and his refusal to follow the path of the NSDAP demonstrate his unwavering commitment to his principles, even when it meant facing immense danger and isolation. Strasser's legacy lies in his bold attempt to challenge Hitler's control over the Nazi Party. By founding the Black Front, he tried to create an alternative movement that emphasized a different vision of National Socialism. One that focused more on socialist principles rather than the authoritarian direction that Hitler was taking. Although the Black Front was ultimately unsuccessful in stopping Hitler's rise to power, Strasser's actions showcased the existence of resistance within the Nazi ranks. His story reveals that not everyone within the party was united behind Hitler's leadership, and there were those who sought to steer Germany in a different direction. Reflecting on Strasser's impact, one can't help but wonder how history might have unfolded if his vision had gained more support. If Strasser's ideas had taken root, the course of German history, and indeed world history, could have been significantly different. Strasser's dissent serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of standing up against unchecked power. His life teaches us that it's not just external enemies that pose a threat to freedom and democracy, but also those from within who seek to control and dominate without regard for differing views. Strasser's story also brings to light the dangers of a single-minded pursuit of power. His opposition to Hitler, though not enough to stop the dictator's rise, stands as a testament to the importance of challenging authority when it goes against moral and ethical values. In a time when conformity was the norm, Strasser chose to dissent, paying a high price for his beliefs. Even after fleeing Germany, Strasser continued to speak out against the Nazi regime, showing that his commitment to his principles was unwavering. His writings and public statements, even in exile, contributed to the broader understanding of the Nazi government's inner workings and the dangers it posed. Strasser's courage in standing alone against such a powerful force highlights the critical role of dissent in preserving freedom and preventing the abuse of power. Strasser's legacy is a reminder that history is often more nuanced than it appears. He was a man who stood by his principles, even when it meant standing alone. With that said, thanks for watching, and until next time. Subscribe the channel.